Hey everybody, it's Murgle, and today in this one, today is a very hot day as the flames of war in Darnassus fill the air. But today, we will be trying to cover the reasons as to how each of the Lady Warbringers feel in this situation. Because how did we get to this point? How do you get to the point where Sylvanas has lost her mind and she's burning trees and Jaina has all faith gone? So let's get into it. Now, first up on the list, I would like to discuss the burning of Teldrassil, because right now, just about anywhere you look, there's a lot of serious anger as to how this played out. And even I admit I was quite shocked when watching it at how the events unfolded, because seemingly it almost looked like Sylvanas changed her mind from occupying Darnassus to burning it down. It was like a flip of the switch. What would cause such a brash decision, though? However, when watching through the cinematic, in a way I believe it gives very subtle but eerie details as to what forced this quick 180. So, the cinematic, we see a glimpse of her past. She's defending her own people. She sacrificed everything to save them, and even in the time she lost her own life in the process, becoming the first Banshee that Arthas would raise from the dead. In this scene, we see her trying to save a woman and child. And it turns out, though, that she fails. Everything dies, and her hope is completely lost, and this breaks her. Losing hope. Now jump to the present time. Sylvanas still has her memories. She knows the elves do not break easily. So only way to crush an elf is to remove their hope. Darnassus is a city born entirely of hope. It was planted originally in an effort for the elves to regain their former immortality, perfect forms, all that stuff. They didn't want to age anymore, and it was born of hope for them. While this never came to fruition and the elves never did become immortal again, it was the perfect place for them to call home. It was an excellent place for the elves to practice druidic magic, which many of them partake in, and this is why when Summer Moon, which is the dying elf, remarks that even if they die, you can't kill the hope. And of course, in the calculated mind of Sylvanas, she realizes this is right. Even if they capture the city, even if they win, the elves would be rebellious, they'd never cooperate, they'd never accept her, and they have lived millennia and seen numerous things across time. So the only outcome that solves this situation? Get rid of them. They're at war. War is always ugly, plain and simple. There's no other way around it. It's ugly. So Sylvanas wants to be victorious in this war. And in her eyes, the only way to have true peace is to win. If you eradicate those who would stand against you, then you have peace. In a world where everything goes exactly as you want. This is the morally gray that gets memed about so much. This is why, even though it is brutal and harsh, Saurfang stands there and does not interfere with the orders. Despite how much her actions might be atrocities, she is still technically protecting the primary interest of her faction side, and that's the continued existence of the Horde. She's merely trying to remove all competition because the Horde and Alliance in her eyes cannot coexist peacefully. At least that's what she believes. Because no matter what happens, there will always be individuals who try to push the balance of power in the wrong direction, one way or the other. She wasn't even the only one who shared this philosophy. Back in Mist of Pandaria, Wrathion, he also believed that Azeroth could only be protected if one side was victorious. The Alliance or Horde, it didn't matter, one just had to stand atop the pillar. It's an interesting philosophy, but, that's how he believed it. There was only way you could save Azeroth and keep the peace as if one side won. So, I think he's coming back in Battle for Azeroth. I thought it was pretty cool, because there is actually little hints of him in the next expansion. But, point aside, back to Sylvanas. The burning of Teldrassil was not a decision made without repercussion in mind. She knew that this would definitely cause a lot of backlash. And it was not made purely out of spite. In her eyes, it was probably a wasted effort to try and tame the denizens of Darnassus, because they would simply never, ever believe in her cause or work with her, even if they were purely bystanders. War war never changes. It will always be a mess where either side suffers greatly at the cost of innocence. She experienced in the past herself, and she knows that it will always be this way. So the only way to win and protect the peace is victory. In a way, this leads into why Jaina has been filled to the brim with rage and sorrow herself. In her cinematic, we can see her being taken in a ferry by a hooded stranger, who is later revealed to be Daelin, her father, into the ocean surrounded by dead. The Daughter of the Seas has suffered more than most characters in terms of lore. She betrayed her father, all in the name of peace. Jaina didn't simply stand aside, as the lyrics might say. Anyways, Daelin is a prime example of why the factions struggle to find any sort of peace. Daelin lost his son during the conflicts, and he would never let his hatred for the Horde rest because of this matter. The song is biased, and it makes it sound like Daelin is such a great guy and he never did any wrong, and that's because it's being sung from the perspective of the Coltran people. Because when he sailed to Kalimdor to find Jaina, as it insists, he was of course pleased to find that she was well in Theramore. However, Jaina had become close friends with Thrall already by this point. They both trusted each other greatly, and when he arrived, he refused to accept that friendship. He refused to believe that the Horde could be any kind of good people. They were all bad in his eyes. They were nothing more than criminals. So Jaina had already bartered some kind of peace between the Horde and the Alliance in a way. But Daelin did not heed this. He did not believe that it was possible. And then he eventually used Theramore to attack the Orcish lands. He was trying to conquer them. But he fails, and he was eventually pushed back into the city, where he barricaded himself in. He put the ships on the ocean so that nothing could come in or out, pretty much. It didn't matter, though. Jaina assisted the Horde in destroying her father's ships, as she was well studied in how they worked and stuff, and she's obviously a powerful sorceress. And they were able to push back into Theramore, at which point they captured the city. After finally breaking into the keep, Thrall tried to reason with Daelin that the Horde were not the savages that he once knew, and that peace could be bartered between the factions. It mattered not to him, though. In his eyes, they were simply beasts that needed to be eradicated. So he proceeded to attack, and was felled in combat. Before he passed, Jaina kneeled down and said, "You should have listened, father." And thus, the Daughter of the Seas had betrayed her family, all in the name of peace. That peace would of course be short-lived, though, and eventually Jaina would suffer way more than you can imagine. All she ever really cared about was the protection of the people of Theramore. She was their leader and cared deeply about them. And then Garrosh came around and nuked the place. Ronan sacrificed himself. He was her mentor. But in his last effort, he protected Jaina from the blast. She had to watch as all of her friends died, all the loved ones, everything turned to ash and was eradicated by the mana bomb. And this has definitely given her a lot of reasons to be upset, and she was only trying to form peace between the factions. However, as seen many years down the line, the hatred has molded her into a very angry individual. As seen in the cinematic, she says, "I'm listening now, father," to Daelin, who was the ferryman of the boat. At which point he fades away, likely content that his daughter now sees the world as he once did. That's also a very dangerous thing, though, because it also means that Jaina no longer sees the Horde as redeemable. They're all traitorous monsters in her eyes for letting the events unfold as they did. She doesn't even blame them for Garrosh's actions, but I'm quite certain she holds them accountable for letting things escalate to the point that they did. She also had to sit around and brew with the idea that the Horde once again failed her at the Broken Shore, which resulted in the death of Varian. And at this point, she really has no hope that things can get better. And much like Sylvanas, she only believes the solution is complete victory, which means the destruction of the opposite faction. Anywho, that's my take on the subject. While I would much rather have had some kind of secret plot as to why the world tree burns, it's not really out of the question for Sylvanas to just outright do it herself. It makes sense, and while it's constantly joked about, the sense of morality is a really hard thing to discover because What may seem moral to one character, she's protecting her faction, she's protecting the Horde's interest by getting rid of the Darnasian people. It definitely doesn't seem moral to the other faction, because it was a very ruthless thing to do. But that's my take on it, and maybe got a different idea. I would love to hear comments down below. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you again real soon. Bye-bye.